Hello, I'm Panos Kotzathanasis, and this is ASEAN Movie Pulse interviews. Today I'm here with Shea Formanes, whose film we just reviewed in the process of the Submit Your Film initiative in ASEAN Movie Pulse. How are you, Shea?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Uh, First thing that drew my attention to the movie is that you managed to shoot like essentially a feature with only 10,000 budget. So how was that?
A very difficult, very informative process. A lot of it was so the budget was 10,000 that we were able to get in large part because of fiscal sponsorship with Northwest Film Forum, which is a local nonprofit organization here in Seattle that is based on arts education and specifically grassroots organizing for film and television. Um, and we also had a crowdfunding campaign where we, resourced a lot of funds from our respective communities here in Seattle and beyond. And I made sure that the majority of the budget that we had went straight to compensating the cast and the crew because that was something that was really important to me. A lot of it, like I'd graduated college right when we started making the movie, so I worked a lot during college, so I just chipmunked a lot of my money and then used that to pay for like other expenses such as insurance and permits and stuff like that. So um yeah, a lot of it was getting really creative with the resources that the little resources that we were able to get. So a lot of us had just graduated from our film programs in Washington, so we sourced a lot of our equipment, a lot of our cameras from there. Um, we were able to get rentals for free, so we were able to save money on that. Um, and we shot mainly in two locations, one in a park and one in a house location, and we're able to draw up a location agreement with the homeowner where we're able to use the majority of the house for one for equipment storage and for craft services and the other for like shooting the film. So we had to get really creative with the little amount of money and resources we had, but and we only had 6 days to film it. So, which is also a bit of a time crunch. But I'm proud that we were able to make, what we were able to make with the limited amount of resources and time that we had. And also everyone was very much like learning about film for the first time, or this is their first feature film experience. So, um, making sure that we were all able to make like an equitable, comfortable space to learn and grow with each other was important to me as a director.
Mhm, mhm. But others in your stead, considering the budget of the movie, would probably opt for a short film, but you went for a feature. Why? Let's say.
Yeah. So I I really wanted to I think I originally this was supposed to be a short film and then and then the film progressively got longer and longer. And then I realized, oh, this is a feature. So once I had gathered the crew that we needed, I was able to talk to like my producer and my assistant director, and we were talking about like whether or not this would merit a short film or a feature film. And we were like, you know what? Let's go for it and like a feature film. And because our two options were we make a proof of concept for with the 10,000 that we had as like a calling card for a feature, or we were able to use the money that we already had to just go ahead and make the feature. And we decided to go ahead and make the feature. Because, we making a proof of concept, obviously it's going to take longer and it's going to obviously require more money in the long run because you make the short, then you have to get the money for the feature, which like, would require more funds and more networking and stuff. But we had the community that we had, and so we were like, why don't we try and capitalize on this now? So that's essentially what we did. And looking back, it's like I learned a lot of hard lessons on that shoot and throughout the whole production process. I'm really happy that we were able to make what we made. Um, yeah, but obviously I would have loved to have more resources, but I think it also forced us to be more creative with what we had, um, and forced us to problem solve in a way where it would be efficient for time and also to make sure that everyone in the crew and cast had what they needed to do their job properly.
Hmm. Hmm. And tell me a bit about the inspiration behind the story. How did you come up with the story, let's say?
Yeah. So I'm Filipino American and I grew up in a very um a matriarch kind of family where strong Filipino women were like at the head of it. My mom especially. My mom was like a huge inspiration for this movie. And uh growing up I heard a lot about Filipino mythology, about uh uh Filipino spirits that took the form of women who basically embodied different parts of nature, and they would either like lead people to their deaths, or they would, you know, eventually throughout the course of the myth like teach lonely travelers or wayward people like lessons about their lives or have a new perspective on their life. And you know, hearing a lot about that growing up, you know, I always wondered about the humanity of those mythological creatures and those people, and how lonely that experience might be for somebody to kind of like exist only to teach other people lessons about life. And especially many of these people were immortal, so they were kind of, you know, damned to live an eternal life by themselves. So I kind of wanted to create a story adding humanity to a like a mythological creature that's inspired by my own culture, and um you know, and turned it into a story about lonely people realizing that they don't have to be lonely anymore. And um uh I was especially keen about creating a story about women of color bonding with each other and especially learning to heal from their respective experiences with grief and death and in mourning, and learning that they don't have to be alone and that they're able to relate to each other and be in community and be there for each other. As they're grieving and learning to heal. So that was the main inspiration for this story. Um, just to have like a sort of like gentle and like a gentle tale about like learning to heal and with other people. And while with like a fantastical sci-fi twist, because I love sci-fi and I love fantasy. So it's just a combination of a lot of things that are important to me and that I love.
Hmm. Hmm. And how difficult was it to combine these elements within the film, the coming of age drama with science fiction and fantasy?
It actually, from a storytelling standpoint, it was surprisingly easy because there's a lot of elements of coming of age stories that fit well with the sci-fi fantasy drama or like the sci-fi fantasy format, because with sci-fi a lot of the intrigue that comes with that genre is like from the unknown, discovering the unknown. And same thing with fantasy, it's about discovering like, you know, parts about yourself that you didn't know were possible, and like now you suddenly have like these powers and you don't understand. So it also comes with like, I guess with the coming of age there's like that horror of it, especially with Ren, who in the movie is revealed to be like half plant and half human. She grapples a lot with her humanity and her mortality, um because she grew up not understanding like her own body and like how she is growing, and like even like, you know, how long she'll live, because she didn't like, her legacy kind of starts and ends with her. She doesn't have anyone in her family like her, so she had to teach herself a lot of things. So you know, the sci-fi of it is from Bren trying to understand herself and like, you know, like scientifically, like how she works, like the plants growing out of her skull and stuff like that. But it's also with Ada, who is a botanist. She became a botanist in large part to help out her mother, and to understand like the biology that comes with the plants, and like also having like sort like crafting some sort of like pseudo medication to help her with her chronic pain. So it's like a lot of these like complex relationships between science and almost, and I guess love, which is a weird thing to think about, but that's how I found that intersection with the storytelling between science fiction, coming of age, and fantasy. Because I think the through line with all of it is like how you use genre and how you use, I guess, magic to communicate like love that you have for other people, like your family, your friends, your just your loved ones in general. Um, Having that discovery is kind of like the joy of this that I had with making this story and making this film with all of these people. Um, yeah.
Hmm. And do you identify with any of the characters, would you say?
Yes, definitely. I incorporated a lot of myself with in both Ada and Ren. Ada in that I have a really close relationship with my family. And in this case my mom. Um my mom and I like we grew up really close to each other and we're still extremely close. Like I live with my family and one of the things that we taught each other is like to, we'll try and we'll always have each other's backs. And um in my family, like, I have a lot of people who are like on the autism spectrum who like have like chronic illness, who like have like pre-existing health conditions where we kind of just have to adapt day to day to like, you know, um still live and also to manage our respective abilities and our conditions and illnesses or whatever we have. And we learn to do that together as a family. And that's something that I wanted to represent and incorporate in uh Ada and Mirren's relationship to show that sort of day to day, they'll always be there for each other, but also show like it's not easy. Um, and the strain that that can potentially put on a mother-daughter relationship. I know Ada, she feels a lot of responsibility for her mother, and in a weird way, she feels like she had to raise her mother, um, which itself is its own can of worms. And Mirren, she feels guilty and responsible for um in her eyes robbing her daughter of a childhood and feeling like her daughter had to raise her and take care of her all her life, which is a big it contributes a lot to the decision that she makes at the end of the movie and the choice that she basically like uses medical euthanasia to end her own life. Um and she asks her daughter to do it because her daughter's the only person she trusts enough to do something that intimate and that personal. And um it's in the sort of the philosophical conversation that the two of them have at the end of the movie is, you know, um, what constitutes a life worth living and how you determine whether or not you've lived a life that you're happy to have lived and whether and in Marin's eyes, like, is she okay with with putting an end to it? And what does that mean for her daughter and like her friend Inez, like, how are they able to continue their lives after? So it's more, I think it's Mirren, she didn't consider the effects that her death would have on the people she leaves behind. Um, and Ada has to live with what her mom left behind. So a lot of the story is about the grief and like the anger of like someone leaving you like that so suddenly. And, even though you love them, you also feel like, you wish that that they didn't leave you, but now you have to deal with the hole they left behind and like the spirit of who they were. And how can you have that continue in their memory, even though they're no longer physically here? With Ren, I incorporated a lot of like the feelings of being ostracized or feeling like you're different. Um, uh, Growing up as like Filipino American and queer and like eldest daughter and stuff like that. It's, you know, a lot of times you feel isolated or you feel different from your peers around you, and you feel like you don't know exactly where you fit in, and you want to feel like you reach out, you can't, you feel like you want to reach out to people, but you can't. So that feeling of loneliness or specific loneliness growing up is something I want to capture in Ren. And also that joy and a sort of like euphoria of finding a safe person that you can connect to and, you know, realize that you have things in common and that they're willing to take the time to learn more about you and to understand you. It's a really special connection to have with someone. And for me, that's my family and like all of like two or three really close friends that I have that I consider family. So it's a really special relationship and a friendship that I wanted to capture with Ada and Ren, and with Ren having that journey and showcasing her journey of learning to embrace what makes her different and to accept herself. And it helps her grow as a person and to grapple with what she's gone through with her family, especially with her mom, and to realize that there's nothing wrong with her and that she is able to be herself in like in all the ways that she can be, and that there's going to be people who embrace her exactly as she is and are willing to grow with her and learn with her. Um yeah, which is really special to me and like really important to portray.
So the film was like a sort of psychotherapy for you, right? Or something like
I
yes.
guess it's
But
like it's psych I guess it's psychotherapy, but it's also just um it was important for myself and my crew, and because we all, like my crew especially, consists entirely of people of color who are queer, who are disabled, or who otherwise come from like marginalized communities. A lot of us have not seen ourselves are seen of ourselves represented on screen or on film sets. So, being able to make this movie together and learn with each other, we basically a philosophy that I have is we create the films that we want to see, and if there is a deficit in opportunities for people like us in the film industry, well, we make the work, we make those opportunities. If they're not made, if there's none for us, we make it for us, for other people, for to make sure that our communities are represented. So that was really important to me, and that was a factor in like why this movie got made and why it was important to myself and my cast and my crew that it got made, because for many of us it was our first opportunity to be on a feature film set, and to that in a way like for a lot of us, like, that we got a chance to make something like this, because, you know, we as marginalized people, we often don't get the chances to showcase, what we can do or the stories we can tell. So now we're able to do that, and we're a part of that movement in my generation where we're able to tell the stories that we want to tell. So I'm really proud to be a part of that and to, work with and grow with my cast and my crew and fellow filmmakers in my community.
since you mentioned your cast and crew, tell me a bit more how the casting worked for the film.
Yeah, so we cast a wide net of casting, specifically for talent all across Washington State, and we put out calls on like several. We worked with the Northwest Film Forum and Women in Film and this local Filipino film festival called DWAT Film Festival. Specifically, it showcases Filipino and Filipino American cinema. So a lot of it was through our own personal channels where we were able to find people who we thought fit the roles of the film. And I'm happy to say that everyone on our cast are all women of color, and um, which was really important to me that we casted women of color because it encapsulates like the the main themes of the story, and also I specifically wrote these characters to be women of color, so to have that represented it was important to have it on screen. A lot of our a lot of our actors are classically trained in theater, which actually fit the sort of the medium of our film because it's so intimate and because it's so small and it's like a largely in a one contained setting. And I have a background in theater and specifically writing stage plays, so I wrote the film almost to act as a play, because it's most of the conversations are two characters or a few characters or even one character just talking or verbalizing how they feel. So, um, the actors in that regard, they were able to um hone their skill sets in that sort of theater space to have it translate into screen. Um and a couple of our actors, they had experience with horror films and which actually fits what we were doing in our film because there are horror elements within the sci-fi and the fantasy. So being able to work with the actors was really great because we not only had the script that I wrote, but we also I encouraged the actors to improvise in with their respective characters. They were because they incorporated so much of themselves and their own personalities and their own even their own personal lives into the story and into their performances. So and I trusted them a lot to improvise in their respective characters. So a lot of scenes where the characters are just talking, I would just tell them basic direction of like where the conversation is supposed to go, but and like generally what they're supposed to talk about, but they didn't have any lines. I just said go. And then they just went. And like a lot of them use their theater, their improv training to um kind of plan with each other and talk with each other about what these conversations between these characters would look like. And um it was really important to them that the spirit of their respective characters was captured correctly. And to me, it's like as long as they trusted themselves and they trusted the relationship that they have with that character, and I trust them and like how they portrayed the character, and we would make tweaks as we went along. A lot, but we especially um we took advantage of improv and one takes because I'm really fond of one takes and to have it more of in that theater style to make the actors more comfortable, especially because they're more attuned to theater. We would say, okay, guys, we're gonna have one take. We're gonna have a lot of rehearsal with blocking and staging, and then just go. And then we went, and yeah, it was a wonderful experience, and I'm so proud of all of them. And yeah, a lot of them, this was their first feature film, and um, but they've had experience with short films prior to, and like scripted content on YouTube. But yeah, they did great, and I couldn't have asked for a better cast.
And which one was the hardest scene to shoot, would you say?
Oh gosh. There's so many hard scenes. I think, it's funny. It's the scenes that you don't expect to take really long are the ones that take the longest. Um, I would say emotionally, the um the scene that was the longest for the actors was the scene between Mirren and Ida at the end when Mirren is about to die. It was in total, that entire scene, that whole conversation took 4 hours. And um Michelle Coleman Padron, who plays Ada, um had to cry for about 3 to 4 hours. And
Oh.
so we made sure that she was hydrated, and she actually works her day job is in psychology, and she studied psychology while in university. So she and I talked about the psychology and like of Ada in this moment and how fried she would be mentally and like how her synapses would just be firing. And so like she had to keep herself in like this sort of harried, frenzied, like frantic state where she doesn't want her mom to die and she's begging her mom not to die. So she had to keep herself in that mental state for like 3 to 4 hours, and she would just be, and we made sure that she was like she drank water, and she like when we asked her to cry on cue, she would cry on cue, and she was crying a lot. And um, the one person that we had to make sure didn't cry too much was Eloisa, because she was in who plays Mirren, because she was all in like a plant getup, which was three separate pieces that um our costume designer and our special makeup artist Elena and uh oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the name of the costume artist. Art, yeah, so the two of them, they created three pieces. One, it was a headdress, like a cape, and like almost like a front of a dress, and they're all completely made of fake flowers. And we kind of constructed this like um sort of getup with each other, and our special effects makeup artist had moving plants that along her neck and her arms, and she covered them both with blood. And that was like the main source of like the horror aspect of the film, or in that scene. And every time we would have a take, or every time Eloisa kind of moved a little bit, we would have to reapply the plants, and we would reapply the makeup. And Eloisa, because she also had makeup on her face and she had flowers on her face, she could not cry, or she tried not to cry. But like it was also a very emotional scene for her, because she had to act like she was dying and saying goodbye to her daughter. So at the end of every scene, she would start crying. You're like, okay, I have to stop crying now. And then also it was kind of difficult on the crew, because the crew started crying. It was, I had to tell everyone to stop crying. Um, so that was kind of funny. And emotionally, that was the hardest scene. The actual, like, the from a logistics standpoint, filmmaking, the hardest scene was the scene at the creek, where Ren, played by Taylor Friedman, and Michelle Coleman Padron, who plays Ada, the two of them meet for the first time. That was difficult because we were actually outside in a public park in Seattle, with a real creek, and we had a limited amount of sunlight because we were in a tree canopy, and there was only a certain amount times during the day when the sun would shine through the trees directly on the actors where we needed them to be. So we kind of had to like go, go, go to make sure that we got the right lighting and we got the right camera movements. Um, that entire sequence was filmed on a gimbal, and Alex Nygmushin, who is our wonderful gimbal operator, he and we had to coordinate a lot to make sure that we got the movements right. And because there was a specific scene where we had to push in on the characters walking and then push back as they were walking away. And a lot of it had to be in one take because we were on a gimbal and we had a limited amount of time. So we had to go through a lot of rehearsal to make sure that the actors knew exactly what they were going to say, what beats to hit, where to move. And also we had to deal with the sound of the creek because it progressively got louder as the day went on. So we had to have our sound team ready to like, okay, when you're ready to go, make sure that the characters are or the actors are mic'd, that the mic is connected to the camera, that the boom is operating, that the recorder is ready. And our script supervisor, Patrick DeSero, he did a great job because he was also able to make sure like, oh, this actor had like their hair tied up in a certain scene, or their necklace was in a certain way. So it definitely streamlined the process and how fast we were able to go. And also the park closed at a certain time, and we had to shoot in a different part of the park. So we had to once we wrapped up that scene, we packed up our base camp and we moved to a botanical garden, which was several levels up in the park, because the park was situated on a hill. And then we were in the middle of a botanical garden. It was pitch black outside, so we had our generator going and several of our lights. We had all of our lights situated, and there was mosquitoes everywhere, and it was hot, and everyone wanted to go home. But we were able to get that last shot. And it's similarly in the very last shot of the film. We actually had to do the first shot, the last shot of the film again on the last day of filming for the very last shot. Because we needed to make sure it was consistent, and we eventually, in post production, we wrote it in a way where um both characters are having the same conversation, which is the last scene of the film, on two different days. So that's how we were able to incorporate both versions of the last scene of the film into the final cut. And that was a big, kudos to our editing team. And we were able to, kind of make do with what we had. And yeah, it was a huge learning experience about how we always needed to be on our game, go, go, go. And um, but we worked really well together, everybody, and I'm so proud of everyone that we were able to pull off what we did. And in the limited amount of time we did, because on the last day, we had to be out of the house packed and everything by 10 o'clock, and we finished filming at 8:30. So once we cut cameras, we couldn't even clap or celebrate because you're like, okay, we have to clean up. So we got all our equipment, all of everything. We cleaned it, we vacuumed, we rearranged the furniture, we hung up like light bulbs again, and like we cleaned the garden that we were in. We did everything. And yeah.
Hmm. And last question, I guess, future projects, what could you be working on after this?
Yes. So I'm currently working on a short film script, which is about a Filipino grandmother trying to resurrect the spirit of her daughter, who has become a Dewata, which is a nature spirit in Filipino culture. I'm currently submitting that to grants and to fellowships, and I hope to produce that in 2025. I'm also working on on a feature film script that is a queer Filipino Romeo and Juliet that's based in rural Washington, and it has to deal with the X-Men and
Okay.
also like complicated histories between two warring Filipino families as they grapple with, mythological creatures and how much they hate each other. And I'm also working on and currently submitting to fellowships a TV pilot that is a historical drama based on the histories of a migrant Filipino community that was driven out by white communities in rural Washington in Yakima Valley, and how they eventually traveled to Alaska and to Seattle to look for work in the docks or in canneries. Um, and on top of that, I'm also working on submitting paperwork for to found my own production company to highlight women and non-binary folks and BIPOC folks and their stories, and to make sure that we can tell more stories in the Washington area to center marginalized communities. And I'm freelancing as a videographer and a film editor, and I'm working with different nonprofits to help tell their stories.
So
So
you're keeping busy,
yeah,
eh?
yes,
Okay, okay. Good, good. So that's it. Thank you very much for your time.
yeah, thank you.
Okay. Good luck with everything and hope to see you soon again.
Yes, thank you.
Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You too. Bye.